Sue speaking. Tiana, we're okay to make a start, please.
Thank you so much. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Tiana Offord and I use she, her pronouns. I'd like to welcome you all to this event. I'm joining you all from the lands of the Quandamooka people. I am a white woman in her early 20s and I have dark brown hair tied back in a ponytail, and I'm wearing glasses at the moment. Um, I'm proud to be your host for this event, and I will be helping facilitate this very important discussion. Before we begin, I just wanted to acknowledge that even though we are meeting virtually, um, I am meeting from the lands of the Quandamooka people. We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live, and play. We pay deep respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, always was, always will be, that there is no justice without First Nations justice. I would like to encourage everyone watching to pop in the chat what lands they are joining from. Just some housekeeping before we begin. Um, This webinar has Auslan interpreting services, and you should be able to see on the screen the Auslan interpreters along with the speakers. We have enabled the multi-pin function so that you can pin both of the Auslan interpreters on the screen. I think we've already done that. We will also ensure that the recording also shows the Auslan interpretation on screen. This webinar also has captions and they will be visible at the bottom of the screen. However, if you don't see them for some reason, then you can click on the CC button at the bottom of the screen to access them. Please use the Q&A function to ask your questions. And the session will also be recorded so that we can share with others. I would also like to introduce you, just before we begin with the speakers, to some of the team who will be helping us with the experience of the event. We have Ezra Burnett, who will introduce himself a little later. He'll be our chat moderator, and later on, he will also be our all-speaker panel host. He will be monitoring the Sorry, I'm turning braille pages while I do this. He will be monitoring the chat for some questions and comments, and he will ensure that everyone's voice is heard, and sharing relevant resources and links as well. CYDA also would like to make sure that everyone feels safe and comfortable during our events. When we run our events, we want people to feel safe. And so if anything is tricky or if anything makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, please reach out to our safety and wellbeing officer, who will be Liz Hudson. And you can private message Liz on Zoom, or you can also call Liz on 0400 897 989. And these details will also be posted in the chat as well, so you guys can refer to them anytime during the event. If you are having any technical issues, please use the chat function to let Sue Tate from CYDA know, and she'll be happy to help you. In this webinar, we will hear from Eliza Hull, who will share with us her experiences and insight on crafting authentic representation of children and young people's books. This will take about 15 minutes. Lily Galton, reader, writer, book reviewer, and young person, will share her perspective with us, and also will ask a few questions about Eliza's keynote. And that will take about 10 minutes. And then after Lily speaks, we'll have a 5-minute break. After the break, I will speak with Chloe Rattray and Laura Petanuzzo about promoting inclusion and representation in literature and their work in research and advocacy. This will take about 15 minutes. I will then hand over the moderator reins to Ezra, and I will join our final panel with Eliza, Lily, Chloe, and Laura for audience questions. Thank you to all. Thank you to all who lodged questions in their registration. If we don't get to your questions today, then we'll be posting responses on the CYDA website soon after the webinar. Our panel will run for 20 minutes or so. Sue and I will wrap up the webinar at the end of the panel with some suggested actions and resources. These will also be emailed to your registration email after, and yep. Ezra has already done this, but he will post a plain text version of our agenda in the chat for you all. So it should already be there. Awesome. So before I introduce Liza, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself and a little bit about why I'm motivated about this cause, about books and about representation. I was interested in reading since I was in primary school, but unfortunately, I never really saw any blind characters portrayed in books, in the books that I read. Or I did, but they were very over exaggerated and they weren't authentic. So I think characters in books give children confidence, and I'm definitely a huge advocate for kids seeing people like them in books when they read. I think that kids take inspiration from characters in their books, and I think that if the characters are similar to them, then it'll help them not feel alone. Yeah, I read using audio and braille, so I would love to see these two types of media become more mainstream. Yeah, and so I would love to see these two forms of media become more mainstream. I would love to walk into a normal library one day and be able to borrow a braille book. It's a faraway dream at the moment, but I think it should be a reality. So that's why I'm here. And yeah, I'm now excited to introduce Eliza Hull. Eliza is excuse me, guys. Eliza is an award-winning writer, musician, disability advocate, and proud disabled woman. She is an editor and creator of the book We've Got This, Essays by Disabled Parents, which features parents who identify as disabled, deaf, or chronically ill. The book has been released in Australia and internationally. She has also been a guest on The Today Show, the BBC, The Drum, ABC News Breakfast, ABC's Q&A, ABC Radio. She is also a contributor to the anthology Growing Up Disabled in Australia and Teacher Teacher. Eliza is a regular writer for the ABC, and she wrote the ABC Kids show And Then Something Changed, which is about a child with disability. She co-wrote the children's book Come Over to My House, which is an authentic representation of various families with disabilities. Everyone, please welcome Eliza Hull.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that beautiful introduction. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Eliza Hull. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a white woman, and today I am wearing a black singlet and a red jacket with hooped earrings and a bit of red lipstick, and I have my hair up. I am zooming in on Dja Dja Wurrung country, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm going to share a little bit about, I guess, my story as a disabled person, and also, I guess, a bit about how I came to write books, which is something that I love to do, and I especially love it because of the way that we can, I guess, tell stories that have been so underrepresented, especially in the disability space. I wanted to just give you a little bit of a content warning just around, I will talk a little bit about my medical history growing up with a disability. I think that is the only content warning that I have. Yeah, there's a bit of talk about hospital visits. So I guess, to give you some context, I was born in 1985, and going in the 80s and the 90s, we look back and disability was really negatively portrayed in the media and really wasn't represented in literature. When I was just recently looking back at a news report, I was really shocked at how many disability slurs were used, even in, on ABC at that time. So we really have come a long way, but we still have, such a long way to go. So I think when I look back at that, I realize why, for me, growing up, I actually didn't identify with the word disability. Even though at age 5, I developed my disability. I was born with it, but didn't start to show symptoms until I was 5. And that looked like me falling over at school pretty much every single day. And so lots of hospital visits at the time. And I had several surgical operations, which meant that I was in and out of a wheelchair throughout school. At that time, it was very confusing because as a child, you just really, especially, I guess, with that context of disability not being something that was spoken about much and very stigmatized at the time. It was often, in medical spaces where I felt very, I guess, not listened to and not brought into the conversation about the surgery that I was about to have. So lots of, doctor's appointments, hospital visits, and finally I was diagnosed with a disability that's called Charcot-Marie tooth, which has nothing to do with my teeth, even though it's got that word in it. And for me now, it affects the way that I walk. I fall over still regularly. I have a lot of muscle pain and sensation loss. And I can't get upstairs unless, there is 2 railings that I can pull myself up on. And I get really fatigued and tired and also have brittle bones. So I'm often prone to breaking, my leg, which happened last year. So I guess throughout school, I really described my disability to people as a problem. When I would walk into a shop, people would say to me, what have you done to yourself, or what's wrong with you? And I would often say, I've got a leg problem because it, visibly affects my legs the most. And I just felt so inadequate as a teenager. Like I really, there's a lot of hard teenage years and where I didn't feel accepted. And I just really wanted it to go away. I wanted to hide. And so I just didn't use the word disability. And I actually realized that a lot of that has to do with A, the time, B, living in a house where my parents really wanted my disability to be fixed, but also because there was such a lack of representation in books. There was just really nobody that I could look up to, nothing out there. In fact, when I look back, the only book I remember seeing a person with disability represented, it was really seen as something that was negative or a tragedy, and very medicalized. So as an author and a disability advocate, I've now, during these years that I have spoken about having a disability, I've really witnessed firsthand the transformative power that books hold in, I guess, shaping young minds and fostering understanding and inclusivity. So I think, yet we still really do still have a long way to go. And I think when I look where we've come, I can see what we've changed, but we still, really need to keep promoting diversity and inclusion in children's books. I still feel that there really remains a huge, significant gap when it comes to authentically portraying characters with a disability. I often think, being a child with a disability and you're eagerly flipping through the pages of a storybook, searching for characters that look like you, that feel like you, that resemble you, who share your experiences and also, share some of the barriers that you might face. To only find it being, absent or completely misrepresented. And that's exactly what it felt like for me as a child. And I think that is what causes children and young people to feel at times isolated and invisible. And it also can sometimes, I guess, create more misconceptions around disability, in my opinion. I think children are very curious human beings, which is so beautiful. Like I feel like whenever a child speaks to me down the street and says, why do you walk like that? I always, I want to step in and have that conversation, because I think that it's important to not make it feel like it's a stigma. And I have seen parents where they try and push their children away and say, shh, don't look, don't look. And I actually feel like that creates more stigma for me anyway. But a lot of people with disability don't want to have those conversations, and that's absolutely fine. I think that ultimately, if we have books that represent disability in the home, then you'll find that children actually don't really need to have more conversations and don't need to maybe ask those questions of people with disability out in society. So I have been doing a lot of school visits and childcare visits and kindergarten visits, and you'll find that they might see that I walk differently, and they might look, and then you might read a children's book to them, and they might ask one question about disability, but then they move on to something else, like, why is she wearing that t-shirt, or why does he dance like that, or just something else that's non-related to disability. I think that authentic disability representation goes beyond tokenism or superficial inclusion. It requires authors to engage in meaningful research and consultation with individuals with disabilities. So that's exactly what I did, which I'll talk more about with Come Over to My House. So I actually was working at the time for Play School, and they were going to do a disability special, and they were even going to have a character that they were going to make like a toy with a disability. And unfortunately, it was going to be sitting with Jemima and Humpty Dumpty. That disabled character didn't come to fruition. It just didn't happen, which is a real shame. But hopefully one day Play School have a toy that has a disability. But I was working as in a consultation role, and we were doing a disability special, which was going to be a 3-part series for Play School, but it just didn't come off the ground, which was a real shame. But one of those ideas I had for Play School was that we could get children to go through the windows, and in each window there would be a different house that they would get to knock on the door, and they would come over to my house, and inside that house would be a family that, had things that were similar to families that didn't have a disability, but also did things a bit differently, and explored what it was like to have a mother, a father, a parent, or a child with a disability in the home. And when that didn't come off the ground with Play School, I decided, well, I'm going to turn it into a book. And so that's what I did with Come Over to My House. And I was lucky to have Sally Rippon as a friend. And so I reached out to her, which she's a writer of Billy B. Brown and Polly and Buster series. And we created Come Over to My House together. And it was a very inclusive connection where we got to write one line each, sitting around a table, using rhyme, and explore the lives of various people with disability. And also worked with an incredible illustrator, Daniel Gray Barnett, on Come Over to My House, which again, Sue's holding up the book Come Over to My House. Thanks, Sue. And was a lot of back and forth with Daniel, because Daniel hadn't really, he doesn't have a disability, and he hadn't really, I guess, ever illustrated people with disability. So there was a lot of consultation around how to make sure that those characters were portrayed in an authentic way. So I guess when I talk about that particular book, I really wanted to make sure we had a cross-section of disability. So we have a mother that's blind, a father and child with dwarfism, a mother who's deaf, a father with limb difference, a mother with an intellectual disability, a child who uses both a wheelchair and walking frame, and then a child and father who are autistic. I wanted to show various families that were from different backgrounds, that have different, intersectionality, who had different houses, who had different disabilities, and also showing families that where some people, two people in the family might have a disability, or some families where just one has a disability. I also, I guess, wanted to just show that these families are really just, everyday families. They're interesting, they're fun. And, I also wanted to focus on the disability, but also show other things about these people. For instance, the mother that's deaf, she doesn't like messes. So she always, it's a very, wants the children to clean up their messes. She has great clothes, very fashionable, and she loves to dance because she feels the sound. All the families are adaptive, creative, and very happy. They're not afraid of their disability. Their disability doesn't feel like a deficit in the slightest. I also wanted to, I guess, squash some stereotypes while I was at it. So that includes, squashing that stereotype that a mother can't read to her children because she's blind, or a deaf mother can't dance to music, or a father with autism, he likes both noisy times and quiet times, or a father using a prosthetic attachment like a hook, hugging his family in a beautiful moment and showing that a hook is not scary. And a lot of the time we have seen it portrayed in books or TV, a hook as being evil or scary. For instance, even in the movie Hook. So I wanted to kind of push back on that idea. Also, a mother with an intellectual disability who can look after her child on her own, or with some help. Or a father with dwarfism who loves to be able to fit into the cubby with his children. But also show him in the kitchen cooking or using a stepladder to step up onto. Also a child who's a wheelchair user and loves to whiz around her house with all her friends and also uses a walking frame. I think whilst it's great that we have more books about disability, I think it's important that we get it right. And I feel like disability is lagging very behind in terms of other identities when it comes to that wider public understanding. I think most books that feature disabled characters have often actually not been written by disabled authors. I've been doing a lot of research just recently, finding more and more often don't have a writer with a disability speaking about disability. And often those books have a lot of stereotypes that many people with disability find deeply unhelpful. So, for instance, that kind of inspirational trope, or that people with disability don't have, fulfilling lives, or that we constantly find, face discrimination. So I think it's important to make sure that, books are authentic and done hopefully by a person with disability. For me, I couldn't speak to every single one of those disabilities that was presented in Come Over to My House, and I did worry about that. I considered whether it was for me. But I guess what I came back to was two things. I made sure that through Come Over to My House, I did consultation with every disability. So, for instance, I worked with several people that were blind, several people that were deaf, several people that had an intellectual disability, and made sure that was constant communication and just back and forth checking that it was appropriate and authentic. All the characters are really just based on my friends and people that I had worked with as well in the past. On my book, We've Got This, about parenting with disability. So I guess that was my first thing. And the other thing I came kind of with in the end was that if I didn't do a book like that, then we would never have a book that presented various disabilities. That in a way, we need to kind of, showcase lots of disabilities so that children get that understanding. And it's been so beautiful when non-disabled families have reached out and said that this is a book that's really started conversations that they didn't know to have or know how to have in the home. So that's really great. Other things that I'm currently working on at the moment is another book with Sally, which is about the social model of disability, which is about two characters, one with a disability and one without, that experience together a life or day, really, where they're faced with many physical barriers in the world and other attitudinal barriers, and realize that maybe together they could create a more accessible world, to show that it's not the child that needs to be fixed, it's the world that needs to be fixed. So that's my next book. And then the other one I'm working on is with Naz Campanella, and she is a blind journalist. I think one of the first, if not the one, really the first blind journalist in Australia that has read the news. And we're creating a book about seasons from a perspective of people with disability, various disabilities. But our first one is a blind character. And that book will have tactile elements, braille. There'll be an Ausland video that comes out straight away, an audio book straight away, and other little things that I've actually never thought about around having areas on the top of the page so that people that are blind know which way to have the book when they're reading to their children. So I guess for me, I feel like authentic disability representation serves as a catalyst for social change. And I see that when I am in classrooms, when I am in kindergarten, when I'm with my own children and I'm reading books about disability, I can see just how different it is compared to when I was growing up and disability was really not spoken about enough. Whereas my children just see it as what makes the world beautiful. And that is my truth as well. So I think by challenging societal norms and perceptions, we can truly pave the way for a more inclusive world. But I guess the responsibility does not rest solely on authors and publishers. I think it's up to, people that buy the books and have those conversations in your home about disability. It's also advocates as well. And I think we have the power to really demand better representation and to support books that authentically portray disability. Today, I was doing more research about children's books and I was like, oh no, like book after book was going into my cart. I just keep buying so many books about disability, but I can't stop. I guess, whether through grassroots activism or social media campaigns or advocating for policy changes with the publishing industry, I think we need to do that so that we have more representation of disability. I think we all can have a role to play in driving the much needed change that we need. The stories that we tell our children have the power to really shape their worldwide view. And I think what better time than when you're young and when you're learning. And it's such a beautiful time to, get to know other people's experiences and, influence the kind of society that we will, be able to teach them and that they will one day inherit. So by embracing authentic disability representation in children's literature, I feel like we not only empower children to embrace their own differences, but also sow the seeds of a more inclusive world where we embrace difference, where difference is celebrated and not feared. And I truly have seen the power of books and children's books time and time again. So I am just such an advocate for authentic disability representation, to be able to see yourself represented, to know that your story is one that's shared, and to feel, I guess, that inclusion through books, but also to change people's minds or make people think in a different way, or to ignite a child's imagination about how beautiful the world is because of disability. And that's it for me.
Wow. Thank you so much, Eliza, for such an incredibly informative keynote. And I identify with so much of what you said. I think you have very valuable insights, and I'm definitely looking forward to your next books, particularly Me Being Blind, the one that you're writing with Naz Campanella.
Yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh, we've got the book. It's coming. Yes.
definitely will be reading. I don't have kids, but it doesn't matter.
One day. You never know.
Yeah, no, your work definitely continues to pave the way for a more inclusive, book society in the future. We won't take any audience questions for Eliza just yet, but if you post them in the chat, we can see. Ezra will have a look and he can see if he can add them to the list for the end, or they might be covered in questions anyway. We had a tremendous response in the registration, and we had lots of great questions for all of our panelists, and we'll get to them later. If we don't get to your questions today, we will definitely be asking our speakers to help us with some written answers. And we'll get you some answers and we'll post them on the CYDA website. I would like to now move on and introduce Lily. Lily Galton is a passionate advocate for disability representation in books, and she's been an avid reader from a very young age. Despite her very busy schedule as a student, Lily finds time to read, write stories, and engage in advocacy work. She's an advanced reader and she's part of her school's challenge program, and she loves to cuddle with her cat, Paula. Lily was one of the 15 young people who reviewed children's books last year for CYDA in 2023. And she's definitely keen in talking about more chapter books and representation of people with disability and characters and writers. Lily, we're definitely very thrilled to have you in this important discussion. I understand you have 3 questions for Eliza, and then that you will talk to us more about your views on representation in books. Over to you, please, everybody. Welcome, Lily.
Okay, so and thanks for that, and also thank you, Eliza. So I will ask the 3 questions I've got for you in a sec, but first I'm just gonna do another introducing on myself. So my name is Lily. I am 10 years old and have cerebral palsy, autism, anxiety, Offord, allergies, and a few other medical conditions. I was born at 26 weeks and I have many doctors and appointments. I also have a physiotherapist, speech therapist, and an occupational therapist/OT. I like to read, play on my iPad or Switch, and cuddle on the bed or on my bed or couch with my cat Paula. I am quite smart. I'm good at writing stories, and I am an advanced reader. I am in the challenge program at school, which is for academic kids. I have a mother, father, and a little brother, Ethan, but he can be annoying sometimes. We have quite a few pets, including a dog, a cat, 2 fish, 2 rabbits, and a hermit, and 2 hermit crabs. We also sometimes foster cats. My favorite pet is our cat Paula, who is my best friend. At the moment, I am currently doing things to advocate for people with disability and other programs I've helped out with. I am also currently wearing a blue jumper. I have light black eyes and blonde hair. My pronouns are she and her, and I am speaking from Wujak Noongar land. So my first question for you, Eliza, is on the back cover of Come Over to My House, there is wording that says, in the book, there are children and parents who are deaf or disabled. I'm wondering why you say deaf or disabled when deafness is still a disability.
Okay, that's such a great question. Thank you so much. And what a beautiful introduction. Oh, no, I'm not on mute, sorry. Yeah, beautiful introduction, Lily. Thank you so much. It's so lovely to see you again. I guess for me, it was consultation with the deaf community. So many people that are deaf identify as having a disability, but they also would like to, some I can never speak for a whole collective, but this is just what I've heard from the deaf community, that they prefer to be separate because they feel like they are part of, I guess, a rich, beautiful community of people that speak a different language. So often people that are deaf will use a language that's called Auslan. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Lily. I guess where people will use their hands to talk. And there's various different types of, in England, it's actually called British Sign Language. In America, it's called American Sign Language. In Australia, we call it Auslan. And so because they have their own, I guess, culture, community, and their own language, they like to, I guess, feel really proud of that and separate themselves from the disability community and identify themselves as being part of the deaf community. In saying that, many people that are deaf still identify also with the disability community. So thank you.
Yep, thanks, Eliza. Now, the second question I have is in the about the author part, you said that you wrote the book so that kids would be less confused when they see disabled people, and for kids with disability, they would feel less alone. You also said you have a disability. I think that if you write a book about disability or with disability, it's important to have a disability or be close to someone with a disability, so you don't say things that would be offensive or incorrect. So I know you kind of already said a bit about this, but do you have any other thoughts on like this sort of thing?
Yeah. I think you're just right in that way. And I, it's interesting, like, just to talk about something slightly different, but I live in a place, it's in Castlemaine, a regional area, just about an hour and a half from Melbourne. And there's a theatre show that's happening here. And I noticed on the front cover of the newspaper, there's a wheelchair user in the theatre show. And I was like, that's great. We've got a character that is a wheelchair user. And then I find out, no, that person doesn't have a disability. And I think that for me is kind of feeds into this. For me, it's like, if we're not giving those opportunities to people with disability, then that just kind of keeps pushing us out. And if we don't get those opportunities when there's a character that has a disability, I think it's even harder to get opportunities where, characters don't have a disability. So for me, it's like authentic storytelling, authentic casting is just so important because it, not always, but it just means that I feel like stories will be, better represented, more authentic, more real, and I guess will then create a wider inclusion. And I think that we deserve the ability to tell our own stories as well, because, we are the best at telling our own stories. And to have non-disabled people tell them for us just feeds into more stigma and not giving us the opportunity to share who we are. So I think it's really important that we get that opportunity. Last question.
Yeah, I agree. And now for the last question, I think there might be barriers for getting books about or with disability published. Like, publishers may not think there is market for it or not realize the importance of it when there are plenty of people with disability, and it most likely could actually increase how many books are sold, because disabled people would also want the books, and other people may want it so they can learn more about disability, like if they've got a friend with disability or something. But what are some of the issues you had whilst trying to publish your book, and would you have any advice or suggestions you'd like to give to future publishers and authors?
Thanks, Lily. It was such a great question. To be honest, I'm going to be really upfront and say that I was really lucky because I guess I had that little bit of experience when I put out my book on parenting with disability called We've Got This. And that was because I was I was first put in Growing Up Disabled in Australia, my section about my story, and then grew to knowing that publisher. So getting a bit of experience, and then pitching my parenting book to them, and they were said yes. But I have to also be honest and say that was the fifth person that I tried. So the fifth publisher. I had a lot of no's. I think it's important to say that, like, it's often what we see on social media, or what we see when we see somebody reaching heights or successes that we might want, we think that that just happened easily. There's a lot of no's that constantly happen for me, and I think that that's just a part of it. And so then the next part was putting out Come Over to My House, and that was a lot, to be honest, a lot easier, because I had my friend Sally, who was a children's author, and I actually just met her through she was liked my music and would often write to me and say, I'm listening to your songs. And so I formed a friendship with her, and she was already published. So we were just able to reach out to her publisher for Come Over to My House. And then the book that I'm working with, Naz, there's, again, lots of no's, but finally found a publisher that said yes. So I think what I would want to say is just keep trying, and reach out to as many, make your kind of wish list of all the books that you like and all the publishers that you want to reach out to. Create a pitch document, a couple of pages of what you want your book to be. If you can, write your book first, or have some little parts of the book written so that you have an example of what the book will be about, and be able to send that to the publisher. Many publishers, you'll find on their website, have times during the month that they accept unsolicited, which means, I guess, just without an agent, just you sending your book or your pitch documents to them, and they'll list that on the website where they're open to that. And just keep trying, reach out to as many publishers as you can, and hopefully you get a response.
Yeah, thanks, Eliza.
Thank you.
And yeah, just like thank you. There's but I'll be so I think now is my PowerPoint, if I'm correct. So I guess I'll just go ahead and talk through that if everybody's okay with that.
Sue speaking. Yeah. Lily, I just need to fix up the Auslan interpreters so that they're pinned.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just hang on one tick for me?
Yep.
And just while you're doing that, Sue, I just noticed in the chat somebody just mentioned that they prefer identity first language around being an autistic person. And I'm really sorry that I said person with autism. I actually do know that most of the autistic community prefer autism person, which is identity first language. So yeah, just wanted to say sorry about that.
Okay, Lily, if you want to go ahead.
Okay, so here I've got a slideshow which is all about why showcasing disabilities in books and giving recognition to disabled authors is important.
So next slide.
So can you just switch to the next slide? Yeah. So this presentation is about why putting and showcasing disability in books is important and giving recognition and support to disabled authors. So this is Comey. She'll be here throughout the presentation. So she's saying, hi, welcome to the presentation. I'm Shoko Comey from the manga series Comey Can't Communicate. I also have a communicating disorder, and I'll be here throughout the presentation. So let's get started. Next slide. Next. So why showcasing disability in books is important. 1, it leads more recognition throughout different countries, makes people 2, makes people understand how important disability is. 3, helps people understand how to help disabled people. 4, 4, using books is an easy way to learn. And 5, helps disabled people understand their needs and that it's a good thing to be disabled. By the way, that was Comey saying that 5th one. Next slide. So why giving recognition to disabled authors is important. 1, they can write books to help disabled people or understand why they're disabled and that it's something good. 2, they can explain disability really well to non-disabled people. 3, it allows them to express themselves and do what they love, which can be hard. And 4, Comey's saying it means disabled authors can inspire disabled people and non-disabled people. Next slide. So I've got some examples of books with or about disability. So I've got a photo of a Japanese manga which has a character that has a disability. That's Comey's, by the way. A chapter book which has a character with a disability called Out of My Heart. There is a book which is called A Different Sort of Normal about someone with a disability. Another book which it's a Rebel Girls one. It's about people with disability. And yeah, it's a neurodiversity one. And then there's a picture book with it's Little People Big Dreams. They got a Funbug one, which is about someone with a disability. And Comey is saying that the first one of her books is up there. This is the closing. I hope this presentation has a clear understanding of the importance of sharing about disability in books and recognizing and helping authors who are disabled. Thanks for watching. And Comey says that's the end. Goodbye. There's one more slide though. Oh.
She's gonna try to find it. Okay.
And I just put some Comey pictures and put which one's my favorite. So if you want, you can have a bit of a look at that. Anyway, thank you, and on to student.
Sue speaking. Tiana, I'll just pause. I'm just going to change the interpreters back.
No problem.
Sarah, you might just have to turn on your camera again. I think you need to have your camera on to be spotlit.
Sue speaking. Where's she gone?
Yeah, I just want to echo while we're just doing this, what Ezra said in the chat. It was an absolutely amazing presentation, Lily. Thank you so much for your incredible presentation and for your amazing questions to Eliza.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Lily.
The first one about the difference between deaf and disabled was actually one that I was curious about as well. So thank you. So if you just want to let me know when.
Yes, sorry, Sue speaking.
No, that's all good.
I've now lost you.
Jerry, can you access me from the participants list?
Sue speaking. We are good to go. Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you so much, Lily, again for that engaging and insightful discussion. I think, and I'm sure everyone will agree, that your passion for disability representation in literature is absolutely fantastic, and that we all appreciate your wonderful questions and perspective that you brought to the discussion. Now we're just going to take a short break, a short 5-minute break. So this is a great time to stretch, grab a drink, or just relax for a moment. when we return, we will hear from Chloe and Laura, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes. Yeah. So that'll be 6:55 for Queensland. I'm not sure about the other states.
4:50. Sue speaking. 4:55 for Perth and WA, and South Australia and Northern Territory is half an hour behind, so it'll be 6:25. Sorry.
Oh, 6:25. Yep. Cool. Okay. Awesome. Okay, everyone, welcome back from the break. I hope you had a nice drink of water or stretch your legs. We will now go on to the panel discussion, featuring, sorry, not the panel discussion. We're going to go on to feature some of our disability advocates, to have a discussion on promoting inclusion and representation in literature. Chloe and Laura. So first, I will just ask Chloe and Laura to introduce themselves. So if you guys could just, your names, where you're calling in from, visual description, pronouns. Yeah. So we'll start with Chloe.
Hi everyone, I'm Chloe. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm dialing in from Whadjuk Noongar country. By way of visual description, I am in my late 20s. I have light brown skin, dark brown hair, and dark brown eyes. My hair is wavy with a fringe about shoulder length. And I'm wearing glasses, I've got some nose piercings, and I'm wearing a white t-shirt with a dark green knitted vest. And I'm sitting in my study with a window next to me and my desk with some books and a plant behind me.
Thank you so much, Chloe. And then Laura, if we could just get you to introduce yourself as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tiana. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura. My pronouns are she and her. I'm joining today from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country. And visual description of me is that I am an Italian woman in my late 30s, late 20s. And I am wearing pink glasses. My hair is tied up behind me. I'm also wearing watermelon earrings that I'm obsessed with. They're really dangly. And I'm also wearing a grey jumper from Clothing the Gap. And yeah, I am a disabled writer and bibliophile, which means I just love books, and I'm so excited to be here. Thanks.
Thank you guys so much, and thank you for the very detailed visual descriptions. I really appreciate it. We're thrilled to have you guys both here today. So we're just going to dive into the discussion. So my first question is for you, Chloe. And I'd like to ask you why you think it's important to have diverse and accurate representation of disability in TV or books, or things that children and young people engage with. How does this contribute to the broader goals of inclusion and diversity?
That is a great question. And I also realized I sort of didn't really introduce who I am. I just introduced where I'm coming from. But I am a PhD student and I'm researching disability and queer representation in children's animated television. So I'm also a bibliophile. I love reading, love books, and I think everyone deserves to be represented. So that's why I'm here. As for the question, so why it's important to have that representation, I think there's sort of two sides to this question. So there are benefits for people or children with disability and also benefits for people without disability. So for people with disability, representation of diverse identities like disability in media, whether that's books or TV or whatever, can really shape our self-image and the way we see ourselves and feel about ourselves. So for us, seeing characters who also have a disability can either be really helpful or it can hinder us depending on how the representation is. So this means that if the only representations of disability that are presented to us are negative or they reinforce those stereotypes, we might be more likely to internalize that and feel that way about ourselves. But the good news is that the opposite is also true. So having diverse and genuine representation of disability can help us feel more confident and have pride in who we are and have pride in our disability. And then as for people who don't have a disability, basically media in general kind of allows us to meet people outside of our usual social circles. So if you are someone who doesn't have a disability and you don't think you really know anyone with a disability, engaging with media that does feature disability in a complex and genuine way can really help open up people's worldviews. And children especially who are kind of exposed to different sorts of people, whether in real life or through media, are likely to carry those positive attitudes into adulthood as well. So overall, it helps contribute to a more inclusive world in general. And I also think that everyone benefits from diversity in stories. I think it creates better stories. I think it's more interesting to engage with all those different fresh perspectives rather than hearing or seeing the same stories over and over again.
I completely agree. Thank you so much. Laura, this is another big question, but it also allows you to comment on the importance of representation and the question is, how can writers, publishers, and educators collaborate to improve the representation of disabled characters in books? What support systems need to be in place for disabled writers?
Laura speaking. Love this question. Before I jump into it, I'm going to do what Chloe did and just do a quick hi. I am a disability advocate and writer. I review books regularly. Specifically, I try to focus on books with disability representation. And yeah, I think this event is super duper important, and I'm so privileged to be part of it because I often say that I believe that books can change the world. And it's not just that I believe that, it's that I know that because they've changed mine and they continue to change mine every day. When I was growing up as a disabled young person with cerebral palsy and psychosocial disability, otherwise known as mental illness, I never really, much like everyone else who's spoken, saw characters who were like me. I only found disability pride, the notion of embracing my disability in my 20s. And I've often thought about how different it might have been, how much earlier I might have been able to find that pride and that community if I'd seen characters who were like me in the pages of the books that I'd absolutely devoured. And there are still so many days now because, the world is ableist, that it can be really tricky. And on those days, it's books that I turn to for solace. It's books that I turn to galvanize me. And I think those books galvanize me, and I know they galvanize, and I believe that they can galvanize and bring comfort and solace to so many other people. So quick preamble there, but in answer to your question around what writers, publishers, and educators can do to collaborate in terms of increasing disability representation? That is a really big question, and I'm going to kind of break it down one by one. I think the really big collaboration there is between writers and publishers. And Eliza gave us a really good glimpse into that when she was talking about her books. And I think there are a couple of things that I want to highlight. One, publishers can make sure that their process for accepting submissions and then acquiring submissions and working with authors is as accessible as possible to make sure that disabled writers have the best possible shot and the most accessible and inclusive environment for them to be able to tell their stories. And that starts from the very beginning. It starts from having a website that is accessible, that meets web content accessibility guidelines. It starts with having multiple methods of communication or contact options on their website, not just an email address, not just a phone number. It starts with thinking about the ways that the authors that publishers are engaging with choose to communicate and how to meet their access needs in the best possible way, which could be things like, hybrid meetings or online meetings during the ongoing pandemic. But it also means publishers and writers thinking about, once they've written a story, once they've accepted a story for publication, what kind of language are you using around disability? Not just, the ways that you're portraying disabled characters, as everyone has so eloquently outlined earlier, but also the use of ableist slurs in publication, because there are so many, even in children's books, like the titles of a children's book that I saw on my Instagram feed recently had an ableist slur in the title. And I just went, oh my goodness, how did that get through? Like the author, the copy editor, like the structural editor, every single person that had to approve that book. And no one stopped and thought, hang on a second, this like title and these words are perpetuating really damaging ideas. So I think every single person involved in the publishing process in that way has a role in calling out that ableism, in saying, hey, hang on a second, I think we can do better with our language. Can we choose a different word there? And that can be hard, I get it, like speaking out and speaking up, particularly when a lot of people don't necessarily understand that the origins of very many ableist slurs that have been normalized are quite damaging and ableist. But if you do speak up, the world will be better for it. So that's the collaboration between writers and publishers. And I'm aware that I'm going on and on, but this is just like my favorite topic ever. So people cut me off and compassionately interrupt me if you need to. But educators are one of the first ports of call for young students. And they were one of the first ways that I was personally introduced to books and to positive representation. And so what I think is really important for educators to do is to talk to students about disability. Don't just kind of like hide it away. Don't just kind of brush it aside, because all that does is, again, perpetuate that notion that disabled people are othered, that we're alienated, but we're not. And educators have the power through the books that they choose to read to young people, through the authors that they choose to maybe have to come in and do author talks. All of those things educators can do to challenge the norms and the assumptions that many people might hold around disability. And educators and publishers can collaborate through the books that come into school libraries. And I'm very conscious of time now, so I'm going to hand back to you, Tiana, but I'm happy to send through my thoughts via email and Sue can pass them on later.
Thank you so much, Laura, for your answer and for your detailed response and going into it, because I think it's so important. My next question is for Chloe, and I just would like to know if you could please share the key findings from your research on the portrayal of disability in children's animated TV. How do these findings relate to the representation of disability in chapter books? In your experience, what impact does accurate and diverse representation of disabled characters have on young readers with disabilities?
Chloe speaking. Yeah, sure. So my PhD project is focused on exploring stories about disability or stories about queerness in children's animated television. I am pretty early into my PhD, so I recently passed my milestone 1, which essentially means I haven't necessarily conducted any of my own research yet. It's all been kind of like background research. So I will keep you posted on what I find out. But in terms of the media landscape in general, so I think it's been really interesting actually to think about the similarities and differences between how the LGBT plus community and the disability community have been historically represented, whether that's in books or TV and film. For film especially, for a long time, LGBT plus characters weren't even allowed to be shown in major Hollywood films because of the rules around what could and couldn't be shown on TV or in movies. So for that community, it's really kind of the issue of quantity, but also quality. Whereas for disability has always been represented in stories. So it's not necessarily quantity that's the issue, it's more the quality. So if you think about stories that kind of most people will know about, so Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, characters like Tiny Tim in A Christmas Carol, or as Eliza mentioned, Captain Hook in Peter Pan. All of these are really like quite old and quite iconic stories, and they all feature disabled characters. So it's not the quantity there that's the problem, it's kind of how they're represented. So in all those stories, disability is usually used as a metaphor for something else, or disability is seen as something that's really negative, or that person's presented as someone to pity, or they're a burden to their family or whatever. Or in Captain Hook's case, it's his whole like driving force around seeking revenge, basically. So overall, pretty negative. So as I mentioned, I'm looking at television specifically, so I had to do a little bit of research about what it's like in the book world. Most research seems to be about picture books rather than children's chapter books. So there is a gap there if anyone wants to go and do some research into that topic. But I did find a little bit about chapter books, and overall the research shows that it is thankfully improving in terms of having more positive and diverse representation of disability. There are still some trends of kind of those like quote unquote well-meaning but problematic representations of disability. And that's not to say these stories are bad or you shouldn't read them or the stories are terrible or anything like that. I think it's more about using them as an opportunity to think to yourself or to ask the person you're reading to, how's disability represented here and how do we feel about it? And it can be used as an opportunity to sort of open up that discussion. So yeah, overall, I think it's not just any representation that we're after. It's not just the quantity, it's the quality. Like I want to see complex and genuine representation of all kinds of disabilities and all kinds of people with disabilities. Our lives aren't negative and terrible all the time, but they're also not like positive and amazing all the time. So I want to see characters who are heroes and villains and love interests and who have all the personality traits just like we do in real life, basically. And I think with that complex representation is when everyone, whether they do or don't have a disability, will be able to broaden their understanding about what disability can be like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chloe. Laura, back to you. We know you've done extensive work in making literature more accessible through plain language and easy read content. Could you explain why it is particularly important to have accurate and diverse representation of characters with disabilities in books that are designed to be accessible?
Laura speaking. Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, just for people who might not be aware, plain language is a way of writing that uses short sentences and avoids jargon. in order to convey or share information in a way that's really clear and easy to understand. An easy read is a little bit different. So it's intended for people who might have lower literacy for whatever reason. And it uses pictures and really short sentences, and it also explains hard words or words that might be less common for readers to use the pictures and the words together to understand what's being said. And plain language and easy read are two of my absolute favorite things. In addition to reading lots of books and talking about books and disability representation and drinking lots of tea, I also have the immense privilege of working at CYDA as Inclusion Support Officer. And I get to write lots of easy read and plain language content at CYDA. So I'm just so happy that I get to talk about that. But jumping back to the question specifically, I think it's really important first to highlight that we know that disabled people comprise at least 18% of our population. And I say at least because we know that that number is either increasing or going to continue to increase as more people feel comfortable to disclose their disabilities, but also as people unfortunately develop long COVID or post-viral illnesses as a consequence of the ongoing pandemic. So given the fact that we constitute approximately 1/5 of the population, it's really important for us to see ourselves in an equivalent amount of literature, both children's and otherwise. And it's equally important for that literature, but all literature, to be disseminated in formats that are as accessible as possible. And those formats might be large print, which Vision Australia Library has a really large collection, no pun intended, of large print titles. But it's also audiobooks and ebooks, and I'm not going to talk too long about the importance of audiobooks because I'm sure Tiana will be able to talk a lot more eloquently about that and from lived experience than I can. But all of those formats are really important because that they mean that our stories, every single story, can reach the widest possible audience and can in that way change the biggest amount of lives and change the world. So thanks, Tiana. Pass back to you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Another question for Chloe before we wrap up this discussion. What are some immediate actions that our audience can take to support greater representation of disability in literature and support disabled writers? How can they get involved in advocacy efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are so many different ways you could do this, and I think a lot of them have been touched on today already. I would say to share this webinar with your friends and family after the session. Or if you don't want to share the whole thing with them, talk about what you learned today or what you wish you could see when it comes to representation. You can use what you've learned to advocate at your school or your local library for more books about disabled characters or by disabled authors, or books in different formats so that they're more accessible. You could also, I love a book club. So I love reading books and having other people read books, and then we talk about the book. So I think that's a really good opportunity to kind of open up those discussions about disability representation and kind of take it that step further. And I think what Lily touched on earlier is really important around how like publishers might not think disability or disabled characters is something that people want to read about, but it absolutely is. Like, as Laura said, we make up at least like 18-20% of the population. That's a massive part of the market. That's a massive group of people who are wanting stories about them. So yeah, write your own stories, write to publishers and authors saying that this is what you want to see, this is what you want to read about. Yeah, make sure that you're giving your feedback to publishers, authors, libraries, schools. about how important it is to have disabled characters and disabled stories.
Stu speaking.
Thank
Tiana,
you
I'm
so
gonna
much. Sorry.
interrupt and be the officious time person.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I can't see the time at the moment.
We might throw over to Ezra if that's okay. Ezra, thanks for the thumbs up.
Course.
And move over to the panel because I'd actually really like to hear from Tiana as well about your experience too. So sorry to cut off Chloe and Laura's last questions. I'll throw over to you, Ezra.
Thanks, Sue and Tiana. Ezra speaking. Oh, I've been spotlighted. I'm going to start with the panel. My name is Ezra. My pronouns are he, they. I'm calling from Wurundjeri land. A quick visual description of myself is I'm a white trans man with blue eyes, brown curly hair. I'm wearing a black beanie and I have silver wire-framed glasses. We've got loads and loads of questions, which is awesome. So I just want to preface by saying that we will not be able to answer all of them, but I have a master document of all of the questions that have been asked, and I will send that through to the panelists after this. I hope you've all been enjoying the webinar so far. Our panelists tonight have been Eliza Hull, our keynote speaker and award-winning author, Lily Crowther, our fierce and fearless young advocate, Tiana Offord, our host and champion for accessible literature, Laura Pinizzo, a writer and disability advocate, and Chloe T. Rattay, a passionate inclusion advocate and PhD student. We're going to have a cheeky Q&A with some questions that people have submitted already before time. Our first question is for Eliza on ensuring authentic representation. Eliza, how can we encourage more disabled characters in books that are not primarily about disability, and why is that important for young readers?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think that I think both are important. It's important to have stories that speak about disability for the reasons that I brought up in regards to, you know, having that representation for people with disability, but also enabling conversations to start in the home for families that don't have disability. But I think it's also important just to have characters that, you know, where you don't focus on disability necessarily, because we are, you know, humans that live interesting, unique lives that, you know, I love lots of things. So I think it's important to show that. And I guess for me, when I think about my songwriting, I, you know, write songs about all different things. I write songs about different characters. I write songs about love, relationships, memories, childhood, as well as disability. So I think that it just enables people to relate more, to understand that when you have a disability, it's not, you know, it doesn't make your whole life. It doesn't affect everything necessarily, and that we, you know, live lives just like anybody else and have relationships and think about all the things that we all think about. So I think that that's really important to show that, so that we just explore that and relatable.
Ezra speaking. Thanks for that answer, Eliza. I really appreciate it. I love bringing depth to disabled people. In your music too is awesome. The next question that has been submitted from a participant before this webinar is for Laura. And that question is, how do authors honor diversity and inclusion, particularly when they are not writing from lived experience? What are the best practices to follow?
Laura speaking. Thanks, Ezra. Well, I think one of the things that is most important, there are a couple of things that stand out to me. The first thing that you can and should do is read books by disabled writers in the genre and area that you're going to write in. And there are so many of them. I'll send through a list afterwards, but that's the best way to kind of see how other writers have done it and how other writers have done it in a really sensitive way. The other thing to think about is that if you don't have lived experience and you want to include a character with disability, and maybe you're not, or another marginalization, and you're not comfortable having them as your protagonist or your main character or your narrator, like the person that the book is from their point of view, you could have the character with the disability as a supporting character. And one book that has done that really well is a recent middle grade book called How to Write the Soundtrack of Your Life by Fiona Hardy. I will shout that book from the rooftops. Beautiful. There's a supporting character who has who is a wheelchair user, and that was done really well. But another important thing to do is to use a sensitivity reader. So a sensitivity reader is someone who is part of your target audience, but also in particular actually has lived experience of the marginalization that you're writing about. So you might often hear the term beta reader, and that's kind of similar, but beta reader just means that the person is from your target audience. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have lived experience of a particular marginalization or that they would be able to comment on the accuracy of the representation of that group when they read your book. And when you do engage a sensitivity reader, it's really important to pay them for their time and their expertise, because as we know, disabled people so often are asked to do things and share our expertise for free. And enough of that, thank you. And if you're looking for a sensitivity reader, a good place to start would be the Australian Society of Authors website. They actually have a database of all their sensitivity readers with a list of, I guess, what genres they read and what lived experience they bring. My hand is up, I'm on there. So if anyone's writing a book about cerebral palsy, I'm so ready to read it. But yeah, super important to engage with sensitivity readers, not just one if you can, because if you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. And we all have, as all of the other panelists have so beautifully articulated, very diverse experiences, and seeking the input of as many disabled people as you can, or as many people from the particular marginalization as you can, is really important. Thanks.
Ezra speaking. Thanks, Laura. That was such an informative response. I will have to check out How to Write the Soundtrack of Your Life. Definitely need to go to the library after this experience and get about 1,000 books out. My next question from a participant is for Chloe. Chloe, based on your research, how can we get more varied and less stereotypical representation of autism into books, such as including sensory seekers instead of just sensory avoiders?
Chloe speaking. That's such a great question. I think it really speaks to the need of having that diverse representation that we've all talked about. As Laura said, if you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. If you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So I think there's things that publishers can do, writers can do, and then also readers can do as well. So what I've seen in my research on film and television is that generally, as the writer's room or the behind the scenes gets more diverse, so do the stories. Kind of how Eliza was saying before, there used to be sort of not really any representation on TV for us. Now, as people get those opportunities, it does become more diverse. So for this specific example, for publishers, I'd recommend working with autistic authors across the autism spectrum. And if engaging with sensitivity readers, engage with readers whose life experiences are different from each other. So not just one autistic person, but a whole variety of autistic people. So this sometimes means you have to be quite specific, you want readers who are autistic and female and around this age and this ethnicity or whatever, to get those different perspectives. For writers, whether autistic or not autistic, I'd recommend just continuous education about the different ways people can be autistic, engaging with diverse reviewers, and trying to write characters who aren't just one thing. That's not, oh, that's the autistic character and that's their whole personality. Obviously disability or autism is a massive part of who we are, but it's not everything. And I think that kind of complexity and that nuance for characters is really important. And then for readers, again, I think showing libraries or bookshops or publishers that there is a demand for these sort of stories is useful. So you could borrow these from your library, recommend them to your library if you know of examples, or if you can't really find any examples, you could write to publishers or authors who might be willing to take on your recommendations. So yeah, your feedback matters when it comes to representation.
Ezra speaking. Thanks for sharing that, Chloe. I really appreciate your advice. Our next question is for Tiana, our host with the most. Tiana, you read using Braille and audiobooks. How important is it to make sure that these types of media are used more available, and frankly, better understood as a legitimate and commercial product? What steps can we take to make this a reality?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ezra. I think to link back first to something that you said before, you said that after this webinar, you're going to go to the library and you're going to get all these books and you're going to read them. That's a reality for everyone who can see. But for me and for blind people as a whole, for people who read with Braille and audiobooks, it's not a reality. We can't just go to the library and be like, oh, let me just get like 10 books about this topic and then go home and read them all and then return them and get 10 more and then get 10 more. Like, that's not something that we can do. And with services like Audible becoming more mainstream, it's becoming easier, but also it comes at a price for us. Audible is not a free service. It's a paid service, so it means that if every book that I want to buy or listen to, I have to buy. There are libraries that offer free audiobooks, which is great, and we're moving in the right direction. But Braille, especially, is being left in the past, and I think it really needs to be understood that it is a commercial product and that it is an important product in the lives of people who are blind and vision impaired, especially people who were raised in my generation specifically. I know future generations of blind children are being raised more on audio content than on Braille. And I would like to try, I think it's very, very important that we make sure that Braille doesn't die. And that's another topic completely. But I think that people really need to understand that for a blind person, Braille is like reading in print or like picking up a paper book and reading it. Whereas audio content for me is like picking up a Kindle and reading on a screen. It's a similar thing, but it's not the same. And it's becoming more and more difficult to find. So I think it's just so important that that authors and publishers are linked with services that can provide Braille embossing and that can provide Braille books in their libraries. At the moment, we've got Vision Australia and Braille House are the two main providers of Braille. So if you're an author, it's always very, very helpful for you to get in contact with those services and get your books printed out and in the two main libraries. But yeah, I just think people need to understand that it's very, very important. Braille is so important for blind people and it's not dying like the common misconception is today. So thank you so much for that question.
Ezra speaking. Thank you for that super informative answer. Braille is so important, and I'm going to go to my library and ask them if they have a Braille section as well.
They will not have a Braille section.
Okay. A shame. But I
Definitely.
appreciate you sharing your knowledge and telling us the importance of keeping Braille alive. We are definitely over time, which is not a bad thing because it shows how passionate everyone is about this topic. The last question I guess we have time for is for Lily. And Lily, the question is, what do you wish more children knew about children with disability? What do you want to see happen now?
Okay, so first of all, when I first saw that this was the question, I was like so happy because this is like the perfect question for me. I would have a lot of things that I would want. But first of all, I would want like definitely this people to stop asking what's wrong with your leg, what's on your leg, why are you like have that. Like I don't want that asked anymore because it's so annoying. I go to the shops, I go to school, I go anywhere. And that's all people ask me. It's not just children either, even adults are like going and, oh, what happened? Oh, I'm sorry. Like it's like so annoying. I would definitely want people to stop realizing it's not a bad thing. Nothing's wrong with me. You can stop acting like that because it's really, really annoying.
And how can people cope with
that? Yeah, and I think that yeah, if like more shows and books, probably shows, because like it's not guaranteed people are gonna read the books anyway, but a lot of people would like watch shows and stuff that like showcasing like things like cerebral palsy, people in wheelchairs and other sort of things. There's nothing wrong with them, and you can stop asking all these questions because it's just like so annoying. That's probably like the number one thing I want to happen and the number one thing that I like hate about it.
Thanks for that response, Lily. I completely agree. Constantly being asked questions is annoying. I think we don't have much time left, but I do have a master doc of all the questions. We have received quite a lot before this event and also during the event, and I will send those through to the panelists tomorrow. Thank you all for your insightful answers to the questions and for engaging in this important discussion. It's very clear about the power of books and representation and how it can make a huge difference in the lives of all people with disabilities, but especially young people. I want to again send a heartfelt thanks to our wonderful panelists, Eliza, Lily, Tiana, Laura, and Chloe. Your expertise and perspectives have enriched our conversations tonight, and I've really enjoyed learning from you all. Thank you all to our audience for your thoughtful questions throughout and for your active participation. Your engagement makes these discussions so wonderful and valuable, and it's clear that we need more spaces like this going forward, seeing that we have gone over time. I'm going to hand back to Tiana for a final wrap up. Thank you again. Tiana, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ezra, for moderating that wonderful panel discussion. And thank you guys for allowing me to be part of the panel. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Chloe, Laura, Lily, and Eliza for being my fellow panelists today. And yeah, thank you to the Auslan interpreters, and thank you to the caption providers today. We've had a fantastic discussion about power in books and the importance of authentic representation of people with disabilities in literature, specifically in children's literature, although it does apply in all literature. And we have definitely explored how stories can shape perceptions, how they can foster empathy, and how they can help young people with disability to see themselves in the books that they read. We have also discussed the roles of advocates and families and educators in providing these books to children. As we wrap up, it's so clear that we all have a role to play in making sure that literature is inclusive and representative of people with disability, whether we are writers, educators, parents, or advocates. Our actions make a huge difference, make a really significant difference in ensuring that our children feel seen and valued in our society. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our speakers today and all of our moderators, Ezra, Eliza, Lily, Laura, Chloe, just everyone. You've been absolutely amazing. Your dedication and passion for this cause is incredible. If anyone has any further questions or needs support, please remember that our Safety and Wellbeing Officer, Liz, is available to assist after this event. Don't hesitate to reach out to her for any concerns or any follow-up questions. We have a wealth of resources to send to you guys after this webinar, including links to accessible literature. And I think many, many resources have been added to that list during tonight. So they will definitely be collated, and they will also be sent to you guys. We have advocacy groups. They will all be shared, and any way that you guys can get involved will be shared after this webinar. So please keep an eye on your email. We definitely encourage you guys to take the information that you the information and the insight that you guys gained today, and to use it to your advantage, to use it in your communities and make sure that inclusive and representative literature is in the communities that you are a part of. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Your participation and engagement have been absolutely invaluable. Let's continue to champion the power of books and representation for all. Have a wonderful evening and goodbye. Thank you all so much.